Good evening, everybody. Hello, Bill.
Hi, welcome, Jeff. Welcome to
Thank.
we're going to be doing this on a more regular basis, coming together. I'm sure that during the week that I do the art fair, I'm probably not going to have any content coming out because I've been just doing a lot of I've been doing a lot of painting and trying to get myself into gear to paint. Like I'd like to
Oh
do
yeah,
like a hundred small paintings, but it's not going to happen. I only have like 2 weeks, and so it's just like but nevertheless, we are here with Jeff, and we're going to talk a little bit more about doomsday
that we are.
and
And
yeah.
so, to my way of thinking tonight, since we kind of, through your very scholarly analysis, were able to kind of understand the trajectory a lot of this has taken and why, even still, there's still some reason based on the cyclical aspects of things, which we can talk more about. We have reason to be hopeful and not um, morose about all of it. My thing is that in a duality and in a 3D world, I think one of the big problems that I have is when we're already living in that, and then people by choice or by manipulation or by whatever means are in their own echo chambers, and beyond their own echo chambers there's misinformation probably on both in different realms that lend credence to people self-sabotaging and not knowing they're doing that, and the collective does that, and that's why we see these militias or we see these things happening all around the world on some level. And I just think that now, with the doomsday clock where it is, and knowing that there's only so much latitude you can give, I mean, I guess mathematically, I mean, you could go to infinity until you get to, I mean, but even that's not possible, you know? So I guess I feel like we've been teetering on this for like 40 years, and the pace and the acceleration is heightened now. But unlike these stories and these parables, and some of them are steeped in things that I do believe might have happened, I feel like more than any other time, this is more up to us than it really is about some sort of Atlantean, or where they say in the past, I mean, that was a very, Atlantis was supposedly a very rich and very forward, technologically advanced society. I think that even with our having that, and even some of the, they say that they were even ahead of us in some ways. I feel as if we're almost reverting backwards in a way, which makes the idea of the trajectory of systems falling, the simulated apocalypse, things crashing, a new idea, or giving new momentum to the idea that it's like a simulated apocalypse. And that's why I posted that the other day. So to me, energies of war don't have to necessitate, because I talk about civil war a lot. And I feel more than ever we're headed in that direction just based on the rhetoric and things. But I feel like there are people, and I'm going to choose my words very carefully on this, who would die for this country. But I think you know what I mean by that. So
Mm,
I'm looking at it from the people that, I guess it's a cultural thing to want to be drawn to certain aspects of things that aren't true. Um, and I know in societies that have had religion, that has been the vein of some of those existences, but it's never been the downfall, um, in the fullest sense, meaning, even today, it's a corruptor, and it can be used as a tool the way, maybe evangelicals might use it for entertainment purposes only. But I don't think in the past, most of these things haven't been of our own creation. And I feel like on some level, we're doing it to ourselves. But as you pointed out astutely last week, reversing the paradigm might actually be teaching us something if we can do it and get out from under the old cyclical. We went from the Black Plague, and I think after the Black Plague, feudalism ended, and then we had the start of capitalism. So, and now capitalism is the bane of a lot of this, a lot of our existences. So I feel like from almost some of these things that have negative connotations tied to endings and paradigms and doomsday scenarios, like a stock market crashing or whatever, we still could move forward after that.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be collateral damage, and that's what scares me.
Yeah. Well, the whole neo-feudalism thing, and I was like thinking this afternoon when I was preparing for this, and that we have been in it for a while, because we are so like my feudal lord is mostly the parent company of YouTube and Google. I've dabbled in TikTok, but I don't really like. I don't like. I don't like being fed what I want to see. And
Yeah,
Meta is even worse. Instagram is like crack to me. It's like I usually keep my account deactivated, but occasionally I go into it, and I did recently, and I attribute going into that as one of the reasons why I'm not doing Tools of Fortune right now, because it changed my vibrational level just a little bit. But it's also, I am preparing for that art fair, and which is, it takes a lot of my time. But
mhm,
it's like, it is so addictive, and Instagram is so addictive
it
to me because
is.
it feeds me
It feeds me
what
what I want.
what I want. And what I like about YouTube is that it doesn't feed me what I want. It does on one level, it does, but it's like I come to YouTube to learn something, and it continues down that path, and it
Hmm.
doesn't these other things don't snake their way in. And it's like with Facebook, it's a little these systems are so oppressive, and and you feel that like the darkness has descended upon you, because when you descend down into these lower vibrational ways of thinking, you get into your lust or whatever it is, your anger or whatever.
Hmm.
It just separates you. It isolates and it separates you from your purpose, your higher self. And so uh, that's kind of how I feel. Like I had one of my cousins passed away last week, and he was one of my dad's first cousins, and he came and visited me. But I think that because I am also in I wasn't as at a higher vibrational state as I was like 2 months ago. But the message is he says, you really need to go back to reading. You need to go back to reading people and helping people within the mythological context that you exist in.
Hmm.
and
In
and that
this
was
form, in
yeah,
this form now.
that's
Yeah.
right. And that this is because this is part of your purpose. And those other things you got to stop indulge. If it means you have to continue, you have to completely delete Instagram, you got to do it because you can't go there because it's it is distracting you from your purpose. Now, this is a segue, but we were talking
Yeah.
about that whole neo-feudalism, or we are in a new dark ages, because my physics professor, Dr. Smith, so he passed away from cancer several years ago, and I was like the last person he talked to. He got to talk to me on the phone, and then he just spiraled out, and then 3 days later he's like he was hanging on just to hear from me one last time. And so he had said that we were in a dark ages, and this was in the 90s, that we are in a new dark ages. But when you add like social media, I think social media has definitely put us into a new dark
Yeah.
ages. And so this civil war that, and we are probably fighting a civil war right now, but maybe it is like I said last 2 weeks ago, like the taste of Armageddon, that is all simulated. Or you think of where the direction of, we are in a world war right now, but it's all in cyberspace, and there's governments with their teams of hackers or whatnot, or
Hmm.
they invade our systems, and they cause a power plant failure, or do stuff like that. And our government hackers, they're causing a power plant failure to happen in
Hmm.
Iran, and then occasionally we resort to actual physically bombing places. But here I am, I'm steamrolling again. And
Well, no, I don't think you're steamrolling. I think you're on to something there because I think what's on one hand dangerous about this time is that that sort of thing can go on the way as it would be simulated in energies that are dark, to where we almost start stepping into darkness unknowingly. And I do think that the habits that we formed as a collective do shape things to come on some level, whereas before, I don't think I don't think that the willing action of people was so. And I'm not talking, I can't speak to other civilizations, I wasn't alive, but from everything I've read about these places like Lemuria, or it seemed to me that it was more natural disaster based than it was about, with the exception of Rome. I mean, where they, I think in some cases, made a horse a senator, and they were all totally drunk, and some of them, all they cared about was their money and all that other stuff. And that's very much like now. But I think the thing to look at with that is that when you say simulated, you make a good point, because we could be doing this indefinitely until we die. And this whole notion too about neo-feudalism, it really is though, Bill, like being a hamster in a cage on a wheel,
Mhm.
because it constantly feels like it's the end and you have no more energy. And I think some of us are waiting for that doomsday because we want to see
Mhm.
that paradigm shift. Whereas in past incarnations, I think certain economic events or certain climatological events or certain other things might have shaped things a different way.
Well, and we
As
are
far as
going,
our perspective of paradigm
yeah.
change or doomsday. Yeah.
But when they're projecting what 2100 being like, where, or the later part, the 2060s, where they might have heat waves where the temperature goes up to 150
Yeah.
degrees,
I've read that.
these killer heat waves that'll be ripping across the planet. And but we also have something that's going on that was not projected, is that there's a population collapse.
Mhm.
In this country, our population is
Down.
collapsing. People are not wanting to, because they cannot afford
Hmm.
to have babies. And so then you have this whole thing of this anti-immigration sentiments, which, this is nothing new in this country. It's every 40, 50 years we have like a wave like this where the people who have been here a while, they completely forget that we came here and we took this land away from someone else who already existed there, and that or that this land really, well, I mean, but then again, if you want to look at it in just different ways, is that humankind has walked on every single continent except Antarctica. In Antarctica, and who knows, when Antarctica was connected to one of the other continents, that was the last time a past civilization, a past people walked on, and we walked everywhere, and we either crossed over these oceans by boats,
Mm-hmm.
or we walked on land bridges. We walked everywhere, and so to say that one place belongs to it, one people, and that's just sort of a recent thing, and I doubt it. It would be highly doubtful that if a past civilization was completely aware of everyone, that they may not have had this a viewpoint that that there are people who are special to one particular land. And so that is like this awareness that comes into our consciousness that and but what I'm saying? It's
Mm-hmm. Well, and that to me, um, some of that is man-made, and some of it is not man-made. I think some of that, in the past, especially if we were the hybrids are created from a different life form, you would think that we would have gone through the point where we could evolve, but I don't think we fully evolved yet. And I think that's where a lot of this is going, because I believe that you make a really strong argument there when you talk about, if all these other people in the world knew, you know, that they were not the only ones, and that we didn't have to be separate from one another. I feel like in this moment, we've created the environment where we've done that in spite of
Mhm.
ourselves, because that's how they want it, and we're not being shown the way out of it. And I think what it really comes down to is a severe mind. I think when people talk about the 5D, what they're talking about is just basically this upending of things, like with the whole east wing of the White House being, remodeled. I think it's just this sort of really radical, way of thinking. Because if it started at the point where you were saying that, people didn't have to think that they were the only ones, and that there, if there were other people, they could be of use to themselves, but also they didn't have to exist apart from other people. Now I kind of feel like, and I think COVID had some role in this, we don't really trust each other enough. I think that camaraderie was a conditioning thing that helps us. But, in the last 5 years, that's helped accelerate things. And it's interesting to me because you wouldn't think of a pandemic as being apocalyptic just for the fact that it would kill people. You wouldn't think that it would have a mental component that, I mean, obviously, factually, through the years, I'm sure it did. But now I think it's being brought to light more. And I think that part of things might involve the reframing of the human mind and some of the concepts we have about being in a duality, and knowing about community again, and knowing about these things, because I find my community coming on here. But even this is probably they talk about things not being real, and I talk about objective reality not being real. Is this real? Is any of it? But my point is
Well,
that, yeah, go ahead.
no, it's like I was just thinking that, oh, well, maybe it's like you need to join a bowling league or
Hmm.
to have that, or what I had before the pandemic, or before I went to work at the casino, is I was part of a folk dancing community. You have
Hmm.
that, but now it's like after the pandemic, I have some germophobia, but I'm also taking care of an elderly person, and then who has been hospitalized twice for COVID. So I take all these extra precautions. I like 2 days ago I ran into an old boss, and I didn't get to explain exactly why I have no problems just staying home and why I have no issues with the only time I go someplace is I take mother and the dog, and except with the
That's
exception
like
of my
me.
volunteer job, which is once a month, and that's the only time I go away by myself someplace anymore. And but then again, I didn't want to tell the person that I have no money, because when took on this role, I also sacrificed my income. I'm kind of a little bit worried about, having being a person who is on SNAP benefits, of those going away on November, my
One.
because of they're not being funded by the government being the government shutdown. And but then, I'm also a clever and crafty person, and I know also that austerity can be a real learning experience if you're willing to be open to it, or you
Hmm.
think it, okay, as a nation, some of us are going to be thrust into the desert to wander around for 40 years before we end up out in the promised land. So if we to kind of like we were talking backstage a little bit about the whole biblical things, but those whole biblical things have gone into the realm of being just they're really not much stories. They're not much different than the major arcana cards of tarot cards. These are stages of things that we pass through, and that, or these stories that they are there to help guide. Welcome, good night, good evening, Fatima, and thank you for being here for a few minutes. And tell your brother uh hello for me. And nevertheless, uh that there are all these just different things, and you can use them for guiding, or as I mentioned before, is that we have these new guides. We have like these science fiction writers, and they're writing these, which I've always have believed that the prophecies of our world come in the form of Isaac Asimov, Jules Verne, um, Gene Roddenberry, maybe to a certain degree even George Lucas, but George Lucas more from that movie THX 1183, where you would go into this booth and you talk to this AI person, and or this computer voice, in order that's your counseling, or and I've seen that theme, and that was also in 1984, George Orwell, that these are our prophets, and they're talking about our particular futures, and where I've thought about where
Hmm.
I think we are going is more like the expanse. You've not seen the expanse. You should, if you have Amazon Prime, you can actually
Is
stream
it?
it all for free on in sci-fi. It's like, what is there, like 5 seasons of it. They were going to go further, but one of the main principal characters got busted in one of those sexual harassment scandals, and they prematurely killed his character off. And then once they killed his character off, they couldn't complete the series, because the book series was fantastic. But within the expanse, you're looking at a future that is not necessarily, it's not a Star Trek future. It is well within, there is close to light speed travel, but the the Earth is like, there's like a 1% ruling class, and these are the people who run the government and who have everything else, but everyone else is living on UBI. They have very few opportunities, and then if the lucky ones go off planet and they end up becoming mining ice in the belt, or they go to the
Hmm.
outer planets and they're doing things. And so the only people who are really progressing the species forward are the people who are living off planet. And so you have Earth as just a place of decay, which is actually, if you look at it from the foundation from Isaac Asimov, and it's kind of the same, because they there is one of this quest to find Earth, but it's, or you look at Welcome John, or you look at like Coruscant, they completely made, because in the foundation, the center of the empire, it is one that it's the whole planet is a city. It's like they completely paved over the entire world. And so that, in that sense, that you have the whole natural world is completely destroyed. And it's the same in Star Wars with Coruscant. The whole natural world is completely destroyed. They destroyed it, and all there
It's
is
it,
just,
it's there on some level, right?
yeah, it's there. And then, but within Isaac Asimov and the foundation, it comes back because that whole empire is destroyed, and they go backwards. There's a baseline technology that never goes away, but people go back, they revert back, go, maybe they lose their democracies and they go into feudalize, planets that are feudal governments, but then that nature comes back with great amount of time. But
Yeah, and
nevertheless, I don't know.
I, I wonder too. You bring up a couple things there about if we've gone through this sort of thing before, and then if it's like there's really no continuum because it's like just fragments, right? And we're kind of not just fragments, but we're what's the term? Fractals. Like existence is a fractal because of all of us and the role we play, and then the universe is fractal. Because it's constantly going through this change, and our bodies are fractals. And if we see, only until I can actually get out of my own head and think of it from a different angle can I see something good from it, because we're all going to die, and some of us may be collateral damage in this apocalypse. But, and I don't mean like, what I mean is like famine, plague, things like that. And I feel, though, Bill, all of those things that have led to it have been there, though, despite through time, there might have been a beginning point and an end point to the whole world, right? But I've always intuitively felt that famine and plague were always there. Storms were always there, like celestial things, natural things, things that would bring about these changes. And that's what makes some of this more interesting, because I feel like if this is happening now, this could mean really the ascension of humanity, because no time before do I feel like humanity might be at the existential crisis it's at, except for now. Based on anything I've read, I don't think that some of the things that are going on now about capitalism and survivalism, and is the collective really bigger than is the individual really supposed to be bigger than the collective? And these are things that we have to struggle with even on a regular everyday level. But I think we're being forced to now more on a philosophical, existential level because we're being confronted with it politically. And I think that is a very apocalyptic idea because it's about choosing new ways of having to grapple with things. Because if you ask my opinion, and it's not because I'm lazy, I don't think that certain modes of financial structure serve us anymore. But does that mean we get rid of them altogether?
No, but
So yeah.
we may end up having that cryptocurrencies and those things may become what supplants dollars and whatever. It will have a different form of cash, but that function just like cash dollar bills are.
Mm-hmm.
But because I think that people in a more ultimate sense don't like to have to be under that level of control all the time, because I think you can only be under that level of control for so long before the whole system collapses. And so the desires to maintain things like privacy and cash and all of that. But maybe that's only because we grew up in a time when computers didn't dominate our lives. And so
Yeah,
we
we've seen it
remember,
from both sides. That's one of the things that is remarkable about us. I think that, just as those people that might have gone without TV or whatever, but not to the extent of the gains that have been made in technology. We've been alive and seen it a little bit on both sides, and
yeah,
even to a greater degree than previous generations, because we've seen more of what the upside of it can do and what the downside of it can do, right? So
yeah.
in a forced or a simulated apocalypse, which I feel we're in, I kind of feel like those energies tug, because the old way of doing things were not about, as I was calling it before, if some people believe it, the internet is the beast. The reliance, the power grids, the reliance on everything being that way, that might put, us into a, no pun intended, a dark age scenario, because then who's to say that, like, as you said, that people could go in and hack that way, and the way we define war may be changing right in front of our eyes. And you give me that perspective that I don't necessarily think we're in a war, but maybe we have been already for 5 years or something. I mean, that's a contemplative way of adjusting your perception of this to something maybe a little more positive.
Mm. Well, yeah, and so the way out of it, but then um maybe there is no real way out of it. But maybe we'll just go deeper into it, and then that we have but maybe we do get out of it somehow. And but because it's like, we have all the doomsday scenarios that have come out about AI and what's AI going to do. And
Hmm.
I'm going to maintain my belief that I don't think nothing's going to happen, that it's going to be no different than Y2K. It's going to be no different than what what is something 2012, when the Mayan calendar was supposed to end. It's going to be no different than that. It's going to be no different than any time somebody predicted, oh, the rapture is coming, or they predicted the end of the world, the biblical end of the world. Is going to be no different than that. And but then we like, it's like what I believe that like the second coming will only be known in retrospect. this apocalypse will only be known in the rearview mirror. If there is
Yeah,
these great
because
apocalypses,
this is one where I agree with you. Unless, and I highly doubt it, but unless it were nuclear, if it were nuclear, it would have more in common, believe it or not, with the ones of the past. That would be generic, as awful as it would be. It would be generic because it wouldn't represent the things that we've talked about tonight, about how it would be coming about, how we were players in our own self-destruction to a degree, how the spiritual components of the duality of living in the 3D and the good and bad and all of that, and then the layers beneath the 3D that are here about echo chambers and what we believe and objective reality, and all these other things that play into it. We hadn't grown spiritually and intellectually to the point where, in all these other previous incarnations, where these things might have led to the end of not just governments or civilizations, but the worlds potentially, with Lemurian, whatever, where we had philosophers, we had Kant, we had Plato, way back. But that was just about, as I said, the destruction of a civilization like Rome or whatever. I think we're positioned to treat this differently, and it might show the power of mankind in a way that we don't realize, as dark as it is going to get. I think it's coming. I think it's going to take a lot longer than people think. We're not getting out of anything. I think there is a purpose to this right now. It's accelerated for a reason, but I don't like it, Bill. It still scares me.
well, but then maybe
Yeah.
in that sense that you are diving into these fears, is that I know it's kind of hard to not dive into those fears, because that fear energy is kind of addicting,
Mhm.
because it can spin you off into all kinds of different visions, and you are tapping into all these different visions of the
And
super
I've been writing
consciousness.
more too, which
Yeah,
helps. But
yeah,
where a lot of that's coming from, as you point out, it comes from fear.
yeah. And then what is
Yeah.
what does in the, if you were to take any lessons from biblical scripture, what does it say more than anything else?
Um, Fear not. What
Essentially,
is the
it says do not be afraid.
do not be afraid or fear? I thought it was fear not something, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that and love is the two concepts that are in there more than anything else. And that don't be afraid. And because the fear element of it, which is, it's easier said than done, because it's easier to be afraid than it is to try to not be afraid. Because
mhm.
when you are comfortable in your life, and when you have a level of economic comfort, it's easy to apply those principles and not be afraid.
Yep. No, I definitely agree. And I also think that's where, as I always describe it, that moment before you're about to fall asleep, that's like that one, if the whole existence of being in death could feel like that, or in a meditation, in that moment where time and space don't really dawn on you. That is what I think we need to head for. Because if we can't be on an astral plane 24/7, if somehow through quantum physics and somehow through some things that we can change, I know it sounds, and naive is too kind of a word for it, um, pie in the sky, but I feel like the way this world is set up, Bill, it's not set up to be kind, but maybe in some way after this it could be.
Hmm. You watched The Matrix, didn't you?
I did.
Well, do you remember? You remember when when he was going, they were trying to explain things, and they talked about an earlier Matrix where everything worked out, but people couldn't exist in that world, and that whole the whole crops of humans just died off.
hmm
And so it's like we do have this world, this simulated world that's built this way is because this allows for the maximum amount of challenge, and you have this adversity and everything else that when you are in a place of scarcity or you are in austerity, you have to use your brain in order to think your way out of it. And so whereas like maybe, you know, some people, they are living together in well, one of the things we have to do in the United States, and I talked about this for years, not necessarily in this, but we have to go back to living in community with each other, because if if our economics are going to stay the same for the most part, we're going to be locked in these in this sort of these feudal lords, these oligarchs who are controlling the different functions of society.
hmm
The only way to have a certain level of comfort economically is you have to sacrifice your privacy. Maybe you
Yeah,
have to
and
live in a house, and you bring back a sleeping porch. You bring
almost
back
almost like well, I'm thinking in terms of the other people you're interfacing with, like trading the skills and the crafts that we all have, so that we can circumvent some of the things that feudalism or neo-feudalism might connote. But what I think is so apocalyptic about that is, even, you know, they're going to be fighting for themselves, potentially for the resources that we can't have. So what you're saying is correct, that the community atmosphere, agrarian or whatever, we're going to probably have to go back to that. And I think that what it's going to do is, what it might do is tip the scales in our favor, in the way that, here are these people that have everything, they can do everything, but there has to be a way that there's a way we can offset them and
Mhm.
have our wealth and have our prosperity and have our dignity, and not feel like we're um just I call it like this. I feel like instead of surviving, we're subsisting, because we're subsisting off of the dribs and drabs of what the feudal lords will give us and what society will give us. And that goes for people who are educated too. There was something highly educated, whether they're in higher income brackets or echelons of income, because I think um, even if wherever they land politically, I think that there's going to come a time when it's going to be so dramatically different as far as the economic spectrum, that they're just going to be one or two classes, and it's going to be the ultra, 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 and then the rest of us. So community is going to be important, Bill.
Yeah, and
Very,
that's why
very
when
important.
I look at sci-fi prophecy, why I tend to lean towards The Expanse and Inception versus Star Trek. Star Trek would be like this, but then to get to Star Trek's future, it required going through some real dark times. And then but then when they like explore the Star Trek universe, they don't get into the everyday nitty gritty of what it's like to live in a classless society. What is that
No,
like?
they don't. Yeah,
You know,
and even in that realm, going back and the stories they tell. I don't know if you watch the new Star Trek, but I think that is something that is quaint in a way because through all the cynicism and all the fear and all these other things that we have, if we can somehow, riding on memory is not always good, even the good ones, because you can't get them back. But I think when we can know that we've produced something for ourselves and for someone else, there's something, even if they don't like it, there's something in that that's very quaint. And I feel like, and I don't know why I'm being brought here, but I am, that creative plane, and that the way in Star Trek that they could look at things almost in a mosaic, with the good memories and the things that humanity did wrong, and frame it in such a way is kind of what we need to do now,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, then there's this other visionary that I've listened to. I ran across him on Next Level Soul, but I bet I ran into him on Art Bell show first and didn't realize it. But he was a remote viewer, and he talked about remote viewing our future, and he sees like something major happening in 2035 that takes 20 years for the whole shock of it to uh to to wear off. And but then in it they see through it is like, okay, he sees I guess it's probably was a climate thing, because I'm guessing he didn't know, but I'm guessing because they talked about cars being powered by electricity, but but instead of being batteries, it's like your commuter trains and your commuter buses on rabbit ears, but instead of on rabbit ears, they're pulling the power right from the road surface
Oh my
itself.
God.
And then and so you're just you don't your car doesn't need a battery, and you're just, as long as you're on those, maybe it's a little bit of battery because you might go off road someplace, so it means that your choice of travel is completely dictated by the roads. So there's no more off-roading, no more gravel roads. And so maybe for gravel roads, that's when those are the only people who are using gasoline or hybrids and battery vehicles, or all the people who live in the rural areas. And but everyone else is that. And then he's in it was seen as that the United States would be fractured into, still the United States in a form, but fractured into different regions.
Yeah,
And
I
then
believe in that. That one I really
and
believe in.
yeah, and then kind of some of the things that I saw when I'm like taking long walks and everything, and thinking of a world where the United States is more agrarian, and where every community is responsible for generating their own electricity, and more industry and everything just reshored onto the continental United States, less things coming from over on different continents, and less things coming from there. Everything is made here, but which also would means that it means that the ability to amass great amounts of wealth is completely stripped away from you, because if you're only trading within your communities, the the whole age of being able to generate great wealth is over.
Or,
It's just
and even if it were minutely tweaked, um, having that fascist overlord in every one of these places that Could be if we go down the wrong road or a different
Yeah.
road.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know where, but yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, but even they have a broader view of what they want. There's something called the technate. I'm sure you've heard about it. The technate
Mhm.
is what Elon's father wanted, which was all of Greenland. So now it makes sense because if you've read anything about the technate, they want all of North America, South America, Middle America, and then everyone would have their fiefdoms, And I don't want to make this too overly political and dour and morose, but I don't know how. And this comes back to your point. Um, in these more isolated areas that weren't urban centers, I'm wondering if the urban centers, the complexion of them changes too, based on what you're saying. Um,
Mhm.
what cities look like, 50 years from now. Um, take the whole thing about the futuristic, planes in the sky, and Dubai is doing that now with taxis in the sky. It was in the news the other day. I just wonder where with everything so disparate, and I think that's what's going to happen. And the reliance on the community itself, which I do believe is viable, and I do believe that's likely to happen if we go down the right road. I just wonder where that leaves the idea of government
Hmm.
in a
But
post-apocalyptic,
but in this
scenario.
but the sense of this whole technique thing, how is that different than 1984, where there's three main powers? That there's Eurasia and there's East Asia and there's Oceania, and they're always at
Oceania.
war with they're always
Yeah,
at war with one another, and then it's, oh, it's this one this time, and then the propaganda shifts, oh, it's this one this time, oh, we were always at war with this
we were
one,
always
oh,
at
we
war
were
with them.
always at war with that one, and it was always just going around, and then and then even within George Orwell's 1984, there was this, you go into this little booth for the counseling, well, there's the AI, and we are being sanctioned off into these little boxes here. This is our little boxes that we're all, in,
Hmm.
and then you know and but then you look at, let's say, okay, we go back to Star Trek, we go back to all of these science fiction stories, has a one it eventually ends up in a planetary species of
Yes,
either a
yes.
one world
Yep.
government. And so, okay, so then you look at Star Trek, and there was a path to the path to becoming a planetary species. It went through a whole lot of hardship. Or you have the Coruscant, you have this one world city, and then this one world, this one people, one world city. And then it's not only in Star Trek, in Star Wars, it's not only one world, it's like, well, here's the galactic core, and then you have the galactic rim. You have where all the crime goes on out in Tatooine at the rim of the galaxy. And then, but then in the old part, the central part of the galaxy, well, the that's where the Sith lords, that's where their center of power was. And then you have like the Jedi. They also had a place that was off in the central part. And if you look at it, there's all these
Hmm.
different things in the start in the science fiction, but it's like there's a sense of a unity, but to get to that unity, it goes through a whole lot of strife to get there. And so to the science fiction prophecies, they all say that for us to leave this planet, to populate the solar system, and to populate the galaxy, it first requires that we have to come together as a people, but that doesn't mean that we will not still have wars.
Hmm.
Because you see, if you look at, let's say you just look at it, just a family. I've never been married, uh but you see people just in a family, how many families are without strife, without chaos, without, like, and sometimes they go to actual physical violence that happens in families and in communities and so forth. And so, can human beings actually ascend to a place where they do not resort to physical violence in order to solve their problems? And then, because males themselves are sort of, in one sense or another, especially younger males, are really predisposed to using physical force as a means to express themselves, because
Hmm.
either you're not taught how to express yourself, or for the fact that when you're younger, you're all hung up on your testosterone, and you have your machismo, and you have these systems that you have to have to be in, and it does not, and you stay in those systems. They start when they're like, what, 13 years of age,
Hmm.
and they go whenever you enter puberty all the way up till when those hormones start to fall off, which is someplace between 25 and 35,
35.
some like 35. And so there's this 20-year period where you may be more predisposed to use more physical means to solve problems. So even if so to transcend and become a new human species, we have to transcend that. And who knows, and then even within the Star Trek universe, people don't, because they're still
And that
using violence.
that seems like a prophecy that, or an unfulfilled wish that, you know, we wouldn't be self-destructive and violent. Um, but can you exist in a 5D realm with violence?
Hmm.
That's to me the thing about this is that, to me, getting back to the basic premise. I mean, we're primates. I mean, and then if things are cyclical, and then we have these events, and even if they're not of our own making, but in this case they are, and we repeatedly had war, and even in a future situation where, as you put it, war could exist, it wouldn't be out of the norm. How would wars in that sort of continuum be solved? Um, would that be the simulated apocalypse in there, where we just are kind of in a different part of the world, or part of a dimensionality, where those things can exist, but we don't have to, we know they're there, kind of the way we do now, and up till now, or up till a certain point, we kind of like said what was over there isn't over here. But now we're being faced with it on all different levels. It's a frontal assault every day. And I feel like that is intentional. And I feel like that's part of this too. And the rapidity, the speed with which everything is coming together so forcefully and things are ratcheting up is part of that. So I could see a world where there could still be war, Bill, but I wonder if the forces that be, or through technology, there'd be some way to circumvent that,
Hmm.
where it exists in one dimension.
I think that my gut tells me wars are going to keep going on until we become a galactic civilization. And actually, and if we go beyond a galactic civilization and we become to a point where we as a species can create worlds, that there will be there'll be a slow transition. But I think that the thing that will propel us into being a galactic civilization or becoming to a place where we can create whole universes. So you have these
Mhm.
whole levels of God, and you have God and God and God, because that's what I think this source consciousness is that it is a species that achieved itself to become a not a beyond a galactic civilization, that it and then it was a whole universe that, because you read the last question from Asimov. We should probably because it's getting close to your bedtime
Whoa.
now,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it's into the time where I need to make dinner before I get in trouble. And and this conversation has gone so fast. We will get together next week at the same time, and we'll work to continue on where we're at. But if we can just look at this as where wars will continue, and because 'cause I just think they will, because I think that it's that whole thing is that the thing that makes human beings able to live in scarcity or thrive in scarcity is also that thing that it's the same thing where why do couples fight? People, it's easy to have friendships with people and you never fight, and same gendered friendships,
Hmm.
but then when you add but I have sort of fights with my female friends, and it happens, when male and female get together, they tend to have those relationships tend to get really strained. And not to say that but it's that whole thing of that of when, if we were to look at the mythology of one, if we look at the Genesis 2 story, where there was Adam, and then from Adam came Eve. And so, but when those two come back together, it puts out a whole lot of strife that goes in there. So if you look
That's
at
true. And
there
that
was
and that's the first World War, right? In essence, that's the first point of conflict in the world,
yeah.
if you think about it.
Hmm. Wow, this has been very
This has
illuminating.
gone
I'm so
further than I
so
thought it would. And I don't
Yeah,
mean time wise, I mean the depth of the
where the
discussion.
conversation
Yeah,
yeah, where the conversation is going. And it can means it doesn't have to stay on this track. It just can keep going on, and go where it goes.
I
All
had
right, so
fun.
I think we're gonna wrap this up for now. We're gonna come back 1 week from now, and we're gonna just continue the conversation on, and then um yeah, and you got your book there, and
Yeah.
I'm just creating art, and I got to get into the mode of
By the
mass
way, I wanted
production.
to say that what you did with such simplicity was amazing as far as the background in the sky of that painting, the way you've created a landscape in the sky. I thought with the it's almost pointillistic.
You mean like this one?
That one, yeah, and
Yeah, this
it's
one.
almost like it's a really really good bill, and the
Well,
distance and the yeah.
this is my reference photo.
I think the thing you did's better than the photo.
Well, yeah, the reference photo. I
Yeah,
mean, I blew it out a little bit and changed it, but I didn't really want to show. Um, Anyways, this is the foothills. This is the foothill where I am at. This is the foothills of the Oregon
that's
Coast Range,
beautiful.
and right near one of my former employers. Anyways, But you know, who knows, I might go back to work there again in the future. I left my 401k there. I didn't cash it out like a lot of people did, and I thought, well, you know, it's the only employer around here. I might end up going back there. I gotta go, and so
Bye, everybody.
bye.
Have a good night.
Yeah,
Bye, Bill.
yeah.